Hello, folks. Welcome to the Executive Order Watch, Episode 13. I'm your tour guide, Joe Biden, and today we're taking a look back at the executive orders that shaped the month of June. From big policy moves to behind-the-scenes changes, we've got a lot to cover, so buckle up, stay curious, and let's dive right in. 159, Executive Order 14305, titled Restoring American Airspace Sovereignty, signed June 6, 2025. Category, Aviation, National Security, A, Impact Level. 3. Moderate impact on air travel and sovereignty rules. 160. Executive Order 14306. Title: Sustaining select efforts to strengthen the nation's cybersecurity and amending executive orders on 3694 and 14144. Signed June 6, 2025. Category: Cybersecurity, National Security, C, Impact Level 4. Expands federal cybersecurity powers and oversight. 161. Executive Order 14307. Title: Unleashing American Drone Dominance, signed June 6, 2025. Category: Technology, Defense, T, Impact, Level 3. Increases drone production and military integration. 162. Executive Order 14308. Title: Empowering Commonsense, Wildfire Prevention and Response, signed June 12, 2025. Category: Environment, Disaster Response, E, Impact Level 2. Limited direct impact, focuses on agency coordination. 163, Executive Order 14309. Title: Implementing the General Terms of the United States-United Kingdom Economic Prosperity Deal. Signed June 16, 2025. Category: International Trade, Economy, I, Impact. Level 3. Significant trade implications and regulatory adjustments. 164. Executive Order 14310. Title: Further extending the TikTok enforcement delay. Signed June 19, 2025. Category: Technology, International Sanctions, T, Impact Level 2. Temporary delay with minimal direct public effect. 165. Executive Order 14311. Title: Providing for the Revocation of Syria Sanctions. Signed June 30, 2025. Category: Foreign Policy, Sanctions, F. Impact Level 4. Major geopolitical and security implications. 166. Executive Order 14312. Title: Simplifying the funding of energy infrastructure and critical mineral and material projects. Signed June 30, 2025. Category: Energy Economic Development, E, Impact. Level 3. Streamlines projects but could reduce environmental oversight. All right, folks, now that we've covered the latest developments, it's time to turn the spotlight over to E. Millions. He'll be walking us through his executive orders in great detail, every twist, every turn, and every impact on our daily lives. And if we're lucky, he might even share not just one, but two of his orders to show us just how much he's been signing. You can visit emillions.org to follow Executive Order Watch, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in a bit.
Greetings, my name is E. Millions, and I will be reviewing the executive orders that made the biggest impact for the month of June 2025. You can find the executive order on the website American Presidency Project, which has Executive Order 14312, for democracy. Don't forget to like, comment, and sub to U channel. It means a little to you, but huge to us. Let's get into the order. Executive Order, Providing for the Revocation of Syria Sanctions. June 30, 2025. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. Me 701 ASEQ, the National Emergencies Act, 50 U.S.C. 601 ASEQ, NEA, the Syria Accountability and Lebanese Sovereignty Restoration Act of 2003, Public Law 108, 175, Syria Accountability Act, the Chemical and Biological Weapons Control and Warfare Elimination Act of 1991, Public Law 102, 182, Title III, CBW Act, the Caesar Syria Civilian Protection Act of 2019, as amended, 22 U.S.C. 8791 Note, Caesar Act, the Illicit Captagon Trafficking Suppression Act of 2023, Public Law 11850, Divira P, and Section 301 of Title III, United States Code, it is hereby ordered. Section 1. Background. The United States is committed to supporting a Syria that is stable, unified, and at peace with itself and its neighbors. A united Syria that does not offer a safe haven for terrorist organizations and ensures the security of its religious and ethnic minorities will support regional security and prosperity. The Secretary of State and the Secretary of the Treasury have taken initial steps towards this goal through the issuance on May 23, 2025, of General License 25 and a waiver of sanctions under the Caesar Act. Sec. 2. Policy. It is the policy of the United States to recognize that circumstances that gave rise to the actions taken in the executive orders described in Section 3A of this order, related to the policies and actions of the former regime of Bashar al-Assad, have been transformed by developments over the past 6 months, including the positive actions taken by the new Syrian government under President Ahmed al-Sharaa. This order supports United States national security and foreign policy goals by directing additional actions, including the removal of sanctions on Syria, the issuance of waivers that permit the relaxation of export controls and other restrictions on Syria, and other actions to be taken by the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of Commerce, as well as by other executive departments and agencies of the United States, without providing relief to ISIS or other terrorist organizations, human rights abusers, those linked to chemical weapons or proliferation-related activities, or other persons that threaten the peace, security, or stability of the United States, Syria, and its neighbors. Section 3. Revocation of Syria sanctions. A. Effective July 1, 2025, I hereby terminate the national emergency declared in Executive Order 1338 of May 11, 2004, blocking property of certain persons and prohibiting the export of certain goods to Syria, and revoke that order, as well as Executive Order 133399 of April 25, 2006, blocking property of additional persons in connection with the national emergency with respect to Syria. Executive Order 13460 of February 13, 2008, blocking property of additional persons in connection with the national emergency with respect to Syria. Executive Order 13572 of April 29, 2011, blocking property of certain persons with respect to human rights abuses in Syria. Executive Order 13573 of May 18, 2011, blocking property of senior officials of the government of Syria, and Executive Order 13582 of August 17, 2011, blocking property of the government of Syria and prohibiting certain transactions with respect to Syria. B. Pursuant to Section 202A of the NEA, 50 U.S.C. 1622A, termination of the national emergency declared in Executive Order 13338, as modified in scope and relied upon for additional steps taken in Executive Order 13399, Executive Order 13460, Executive Order 13572, Executive Order 13573, and Executive Order 13582 shall not affect any action taken or pending proceeding, not finally concluded or determined as of July 1, 2025, any action or proceeding based on any act committed prior to July 1, 2025, or any rights or duties that matured or penalties that were incurred prior to July 1, 2025. Sec. 4. Accountability for the former regime of Bashar al-Assad. I find that additional steps must be taken to ensure meaningful accountability for perpetrators of war crimes, human rights violations, and abuses, and the proliferation of narcotics trafficking networks in and in relation to Syria during the former regime of Bashar al-Assad and by those associated with it. Perpetrators of such actions threaten to undermine peace, security, and stability in the region, and thereby constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. A. I hereby expand the scope of the national emergency declared in Executive Order 13894 of October 14, 2019, blocking property and suspending entry of certain persons contributing to the situation in Syria, as amended in and relied on for additional steps taken in Executive Order Warranty 142 of January 15, 2025, taking additional steps with respect to the situation in Syria to deal with that threat, and accordingly, further amend Executive Order 13894 by I, striking Section 1A, and inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. Section 1. A. All property and interests in property that are in the United States, that hereafter come within the United States, or that are or hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person of the following persons, are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. I. Any person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, A. To be responsible for or complicit in, or to have directly or indirectly engaged in, or attempted to engage in, any of the following in or in relation to Syria. 1. Actions or policies that further threaten the peace, security, stability, or territorial integrity of Syria, or 2. The commission of serious human rights abuse. B. To be a former government official of the former regime of Bashar al-Assad, or a person who acted for or on behalf of such an official. C. To have engaged in or attempted to engage in activities or transactions that have materially contributed to or pose a significant risk of materially contributing to the illicit production and international illicit proliferation of Captagon. D. To be responsible for or complicit in, to have directly or indirectly engaged in, or to be responsible for ordering, controlling, or otherwise directing instances in which a United States national, I, as defined in 8 U.S.C. 1101A 22 or 8 U.S.C. 1408, or DeSUS, a lawful permanent resident with significant ties to the United States, went missing in Syria during the former regime of Bashar al-Assad. E. To have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for, or goods or services to, or in support of 1. The former regime of Bashar al-Assad. 2. Any activity described in subsections A, I spray D of this section, or 3. Any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. F. To be owned or controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act for, or on behalf of, directly or indirectly, any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. Or G. To be an adult family member of a person designated under subsections A, D of this section, and EI, striking Section 2A, and inserting in lieu thereof the following. A. To be responsible for or complicit in, or to have directly or indirectly engaged in, or attempted to engage in, any of the following in or in relation to Syria. 1. Actions or policies that further threaten the peace, security, stability, or territorial integrity of Syria, or 2. The commission of serious human rights abuse. B. To be a former government official of the former regime of Bashar al-Assad, or a person who acted for or on behalf of such an official. C. To have engaged in or attempted to engage in activities or transactions that have materially contributed to or pose a significant risk of materially contributing to the illicit production and international illicit proliferation of Captagon. D. To be responsible for or complicit in, to have directly or indirectly engaged in, or to be responsible for ordering, controlling, or otherwise directing instances in which a United States national, I, as defined in 8 U.S.C. 1101A 22 or 8 U.S.C. 1408, or DeSUS, a lawful permanent resident with significant ties to the United States, went missing in Syria during the former regime of Bashar al-Assad. E. To have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for, or goods or services to, or in support of 1. The former regime of Bashar al-Assad. 2. Any activity described in subsections A, spray D of this section, or 3. Any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. F. to be owned or controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act for, or on behalf of, directly or indirectly, any person whose property and interests in property are blocked, pursuant to this order, or g. to be an adult family member of a person designated under subsections A, I, D of this section, and EI, striking section 2A, and inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. Section 2A. The Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury and other officials of the United States government as appropriate, is hereby authorized to impose on a foreign person any of the sanctions described in subsections B and C of this section, upon determining that the person, on or after the date of this order, I, is responsible for or complicit in, has directly or indirectly engaged in, or attempted to engage in, or financed the obstruction, disruption, or prevention of efforts to promote a Syria that is stable, unified, and at peace with itself and its neighbors, including A. the convening and conduct of a credible and inclusive Syrian-led constitutional process, B. the preparation for and conduct of supervised elections, pursuant to the new constitution, that are free and fair and to the highest international standards of transparency and accountability, or C. the development of a Syrian government that is representative and reflects the will of the Syrian people. Pri is an adult family member of a person designated under subsection A, I of this section, or Hrati is responsible for or complicit in, or has directly or indirectly engaged in, or attempted to engage in, the expropriation of property, including real property, for personal gain or political purposes in Syria. B. I additionally amend Executive Order 13606 of April 22, 2012, blocking the property and suspending entry into the United States of certain persons with respect to grave human rights abuses by the governments of Iran and Syria via information technology, by removing the following text from the preamble. Executive Order 13338 of May 11, 2004, as modified in scope and relied upon for additional steps in subsequent executive orders, and replacing it with Executive Order 13894 of October 14, 2019, and relied upon for additional steps and further amended in subsequent executive orders. Sector 5, Caesar Act. The Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury, shall examine whether the criteria set forth in Section 7431A of the Caesar Act have been met, and on the basis of that examination may, pursuant to the Presidential Memorandum of March 31, 2020, delegation of certain functions and authorities under the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020, suspend in whole or in part the imposition of sanctions otherwise required under the Caesar Act. If the Secretary of State determines to suspend in whole or in part the imposition of such sanctions, the Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury, shall provide the briefing to the appropriate congressional committees required by Section 7431B of the Caesar Act within 30 days of such determination. Further, the Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury, shall continue to review the situation in Syria, and if the Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury, determines that the criteria set forth in Section 7431A are no longer met, the Secretary of State shall reimpose sanctions. Section 6, Syria Accountability Act. I hereby determine pursuant to Section 5B of the Syria Accountability Act that it is in the national security interest of the United States to waive the application of subsection A, Bayou 1, with respect to items on the Commerce Control List, Supplemental, numbered 1 to 15, CFR Part 774 only, and subsection A, 2A of the Syria Accountability Act only. The Secretary of State shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees the report required under Section 5B of that Act. Sec. 7, CBW Act. A. Pursuant to Section 307D, Wustody 1B of the CBW Act, I hereby determine and certify that there has been a fundamental change in the leadership and policies of the government of the Syrian Arab Republic. Accordingly, I hereby waive the following sanctions imposed on Syria for the prior use of chemical weapons under the former regime of Bashar al-Assad. I. The restriction on foreign assistance under Section 307A(1) of the CBW Act. Tars. The restriction on United States government credit, credit guarantees, or other financial assistance under Section 307A(4) of the CBW Act. 3. The restrictions on the export of national security sensitive goods and technology under Section 307A(5) of the CBW Act, and on all other goods and technology under Section 307B(2)(c) of the CBW Act, and IV. The restriction on United States banks from making any loan or providing any credit to the government of Syria under Section 307B(2)(b) of the CBW Act. B. The Secretary of State shall transmit this waiver determination and report as required by Sections 307D(1), B, and D2 of the CBW Act to the appropriate congressional committees. This waiver shall be effective 20 days after it has been so transmitted. Number 8. Counterterrorism designations. A. The Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury and the Attorney General, shall take all appropriate action with respect to the designation of Al-Nusra Front, also known as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and other aliases, as a foreign terrorist organization under 8 U.S.C. 1189, and as a specially designated global terrorist under 50 U.S.C. 1702 and Executive Order 13224, as well as the designation of Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, commonly known as Ahmed al-Shara, as a specially designated global terrorist. B. The Secretary of State shall take all appropriate action to review the designation of Syria as a state sponsor of terrorism, consistent with Section 1754C of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2019, Public Law 115-232, 50 U.S.C. 4813C, Section 40 of the Arms Export Control Act, Public Law 9629, as amended, 22 U.S.C. 2780, and Section 620A of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, Public Law 87195, as amended, 22 U.S.C. 2371. Section 9. United Nations. The Secretary of State shall take appropriate steps to advance United States policy objectives at the United Nations to support a Syria that is stable and at peace, and to support Syrian efforts to counter terrorism and comply with its responsibilities and obligations concerning weapons of mass destruction, including chemical and biological weapons. The Secretary of State is further directed to explore avenues at the United Nations to provide sanctions relief in support of these objectives. Sec. 10. Implementation. The Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of Commerce, as appropriate, are hereby authorized to take such actions, including adopting rules and regulations, as may be necessary to implement this order. The Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of Commerce may, consistent with applicable law, redelegate any of these functions within their respective agencies. The Secretary of State, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Commerce, and the Secretary of Transportation, as appropriate, is authorized to exercise the functions and authorities conferred upon the President in Section 5 of the Syria Accountability Act, and to redelegate these functions and authorities consistent with applicable law. All agencies of the United States shall take all appropriate measures within their authority to implement this order, consistent with applicable law. Section 11. General Provisions. A. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect I. The authority granted by law to an executive department or agency, or the head thereof, or EI. The functions of the Director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. B. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. C. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity, by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. D. The cost for publication of this order shall be borne by the Department of State. Signature of Donald Trump. Donald J. Trump. The White House, June 30th, 2025. Executive Summary. This EO terminates several long-standing U.S. sanctions on Syria, initially imposed due to human rights violations, terrorism support, chemical weapons use, and civil war atrocities under the Assad regime. It instead shifts U.S. policy to work with the new Syrian government under President Ahmed al-Sharaa, whom the EO suggests has taken positive steps toward peace and reform. However, the EO maintains targeted sanctions on former Assad regime officials, perpetrators of war crimes, Captagon drug traffickers, and terror groups like ISIS and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. It also opens the door for lifting more sanctions in the future, pending further review. Pros 1. Diplomatic reset with new Syrian government signals. Support for a new leadership in Syria. Encouraging reform and cooperation. Opens up channels for peace building, reconstruction, and humanitarian access. 2. Economic relief and trade opportunities. Allows U.S. companies and allies to resume some commerce with Syria, particularly in non-sensitive sectors. Could foster regional economic stability and create jobs for U.S. firms engaged in reconstruction. 3. Strategic flexibility. Retains sanctions authority for bad actors while rewarding cooperation. 4. Limited oversight. Although briefings to Congress are required, this EO grants broad discretion to the executive branch to lift or reimpose sanctions. Impact on U.S. citizens, domestic and abroad. Domestic economic. Opens potential new markets for U.S. businesses, particularly in construction, energy, and humanitarian logistics. Legal. Americans previously barred from doing business in Syria may now be permitted, though risk remains in verifying counterparties. Political advocacy. May be divisive for Syrian American communities and human rights advocates who seek continued accountability for Assad-era crimes. Abroad. Travelers, diplomats. Eases tensions for U.S. citizens visiting or working in the region. May reduce risk of detainment or hostility. NGOs, humanitarian workers, may now operate more freely in Syria, enabling delivery of critical aid and services. Impact on U.S. military service members, strategic positioning troops in Syria, Iraq, and Jordan may face shifting alliances as new deals and rules of engagement are negotiated. The EO doesn't explicitly reduce the U.S. military presence, but a de-escalation of sanctions suggests an eventual pivot away from direct confrontation. Risk factors. Former terrorist allies. If Ahmed al-Sharaa is truly linked to HTS, service members could be at greater risk due to covert threats from within new Syrian leadership structures. Intelligence gathering and counterterrorism operations may become harder if sanctions-related tools, financial tracking, trade data, are relaxed. Bottom line. This EO represents a calculated gamble. It aims to reward what is seen as progress in Syria while retaining punitive tools for accountability. However, it may undercut years of bipartisan efforts to isolate regimes that committed atrocities, especially given uncertainty over the trustworthiness of Syria's new leadership. Let's check out what is going on in the Syria region and why we should care.
Syria's war is a mess. After 6 years, the conflict is divided between 4 sides, each side with foreign backers, and those foreign backers don't even agree with each other on who they're fighting for and who they're fighting against. And now, Syria's use of chemical weapons has provoked President Donald Trump to directly attack Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. This is a major development because up until now, the US has only been focused on fighting ISIS. To understand the crisscrossing interventions and battle lines in Syria today and how it got this way, it helps to go back to the beginning of the conflict and watch to see how it unfolded. The first shots in the war were fired in March 2011 by Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad against peaceful Arab Spring demonstrators. In July, the protesters start shooting back, and some Syrian troops even defect from the Syrian army to join them. They call themselves the Free Syrian Army, and the uprising becomes a civil war. Extremists from around the region and the world start traveling to Syria to join the rebels. Now, Assad actually encourages this by releasing jihadist prisoners to tinge the rebellion with extremism and make it harder for foreign backers to support them. In January 2012, Al-Qaeda forms a new branch in Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra. Also around that time, Syrian Kurdish groups who had long sought autonomy take up arms and informally secede from Assad's rule in the north. That summer is when Syria becomes a proxy war. Iran, Assad's most important ally, intervenes on his behalf. And by the end of 2012, Iran is sending daily cargo flights and has hundreds of officers on the ground. At the same time, the oil-rich Arab states in the Persian Gulf begin sending money and weapons to the rebels, mainly to counter Iran's influence. Iran steps up its influence in turn in mid-2012 when Hezbollah, a Lebanese militia backed by Iran, invades to fight along Assad. In turn, the Gulf states respond, Saudi Arabia really stepping up this time to send more money and weapons to the rebels, this time through Jordan, who also opposes Assad. By 2013, the Middle East is divided between mostly Sunni powers generally supporting the rebels and Shias generally supporting Assad. That April, the Obama administration, horrified by Assad's atrocities and the mounting death toll, signs a secret order authorizing the CIA to train and equip Syrian rebels. But the program stalls. At the same time, the US quietly urges Arab Gulf states to stop funding extremists, but their requests basically go ignored. In August, the Assad regime uses chemical weapons against civilians, provoking condemnation from around the world.
Men, women, children lying in rows, killed by poison gas. It is in the national security interests of the United States to respond to the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons through a targeted military strike.
Russia proposed on Monday that Syria surrender control over its chemical weapons to the international community for its eventual dismantling to avoid a U.S. military strike.
The U.S. ends up backing down, but the whole thing establishes Syria as a great powers dispute, with Russia backing Assad and the U.S. opposing him. Just weeks later, the first American CIA training and arms reached Syrian rebels. The U.S. is now a participant in the war. In February 2014, something happens that transforms the war. An Al-Qaeda affiliate based mostly in Iraq breaks away from the group over internal disagreements. The group calls itself the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, and it becomes Al-Qaeda's enemy. ISIS mostly fights not Assad, but other rebels and Kurds, carving out a mini-state it calls its caliphate. That summer, it marches across Iraq, seizing territory and galvanizing the world against it. In September, 1 year after US almost bombed Assad, it begins bombing ISIS.
We're moving ahead with our campaign of airstrikes against these terrorists, and we're prepared to take action against ISIL in Syria as well.
That summer, in July, the Pentagon launches its own program to train Syrian rebels, but will only train those who will fight ISIS, not Assad. The program fizzles, showing that America now opposes ISIS more than Assad, but that there's also no like-minded Syrian proxy forces on the ground in Syria. In August, Turkey starts bombing Kurdish groups in Iraq and in Turkey, even as these Kurdish groups are fighting ISIS in Syria. But Turkey doesn't bomb ISIS. This gets to one of the big problems in this conflict. The US sees ISIS as its main enemy, but the US's allies like Turkey and a lot of Middle Eastern states have other priorities. This makes for a lot of unclear and confusing alliances. The next month, in September, Russia intervenes on behalf of Assad, sending a few dozen military aircraft to a long-held Russian base in the country. Russia says it's there to bomb ISIS, but in fact only ends up bombing anti-Assad rebels, including some backed by the US. The next year, Donald Trump wins the White House, vowing to stay out of Syria and signaling that Assad should be able to stay in power. At the end of 2016, Assad, helped by Russian air power and Iranian-sponsored militias, retakes the Syrian city of Aleppo. knocking the rebels out of their last remaining urban stronghold. Then, in spring 2017, Assad once again uses chemical weapons against his people, killing 85, including 20 children. Back in the US, Trump says his attitude towards Syria and Assad has, quote, changed very much due to the attacks. He vows to respond, and within just a few days, the White House launches dozens of Tomahawk missiles that strike an airbase in Syria. This is the first time the United States has directly attacked the Assad regime, and this adds yet another crisscrossing complication to the already multidimensional civil war. So as it stands now, Syria is in ruins. Even as Assad recaptures land, the rebellion perseveres, and with outside countries fueling each of the groups, it's clear that there's still no end in sight.
Fuck what you think.
सीरिया कैसे बना ग्लोबल ताकतों का प्रॉक्सी बैटलफील्ड? 2011 में कुछ लड़कों को सरकार विरोधी दीवार पर नारे लिखने पर गिरफ्तार कर लिया गया और उन्हें टॉर्चर किया गया। इसके बाद विरोध शुरू हुए। लोगों ने राष्ट्रपति असद की सरकार को हटाने की मांग की। जो एक विरोध था, वो धीरे धीरे एक खूनी गृह युद्ध में बदल गया। अमेरिका, तुर्की, सऊदी अरब और यूएई ने विद्रोही गुटों को हथियार और पैसा दिया। वहीं दूसरी तरफ रूस, ईरान और हिजबुल्लाह ने असद का साथ दिया, अपना असर बनाए रखने और सैन्य ठिकानों की सुरक्षा के लिए। फिर हालात और बिगड़ गए जब आईएसआईएस और अल नुसरा जैसे आतंकी संगठन भी कूद पड़े। अब ये सिर्फ सीरिया की लड़ाई नहीं रही, ये एक प्रॉक्सी वॉर बन गई है। लेकिन सीरिया की टूटी हुई चेस बोर्ड पर शतरंज का खेल अभी भी जारी है।
After years of relative quiet, the Syrian civil war flared up once again, seemingly out of nowhere. The Assad regime, which was deemed victorious by many and in control of the situation, crumbled within days after the rebels launched their decisive offensive. The situation is far from stable in Syria, and it is very challenging to predict what will happen next. For now, we want to talk about the Syrian civil war up until now, its causes, how everything started, who fought who, and answer your questions you may have about this incredibly complex
And that's a look at the major impacts of the war in Syria, how it's fueled a humanitarian crisis, shaped global security, and affected Americans both abroad and here at home. Thanks for sticking with us through this important discussion. Up next, I'm bringing back eMillions for another case study you won't want to miss. Stay tuned. Let's keep digging deeper together. Before eMillions, let's hear from our sponsors at DAH Bomb Digital Media.
Hi, I'm Terrence, a marketing professional with a passion for helping your business grow smarter and faster. Here at Da Bomb Digital Media, based right here in Atlanta, Georgia, we specialize in bringing your vision to life. Whether you're launching your first website or reimagining your entire digital presence, we've got you covered. From modern website design and search engine optimization to setting up your own AI-powered agency tools, we deliver innovative solutions that keep you ahead of the curve. Ready to unlock your business's full potential? Let's build something remarkable together. For more information, visit our YouTube channel. Just search Da Bomb Digital Media on YouTube and start exploring tips, success stories, and everything you need to elevate your brand.
Good to see you again. I will be reading from Federal Register's website Executive Order 14306, which is sustaining select efforts to strengthen the nation's cybersecurity, and amending Executive Order 13694 and Executive Order 14044. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, 50 U.S.C. 1701 et CQ, the National Emergencies Act, 50 U.S.C. 1601 et CQ, Section 212F, of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, 8 U.S.C. 1182F, and Section 301 of Title III, United States Code, it is hereby ordered. Section 1. Amendments to Executive Order 14144, Executive Order 14144 of January 16, 2025. Strengthening and promoting innovation in the nation's cybersecurity is hereby amended by A. Striking subsections 2A, B, and redesignating subsections 2C, 2D, and 2E as subsections 2A, 2B, and 2C, respectively. B. Striking the first sentence of subsection 2E. C. Striking subsections 3A, B, and redesignating subsections 3C, 3D, and 3E as subsections 3A, 3B, and 3C, respectively. D. Striking from subsection 3C the phrase, in executive order. 14028. I directed the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security to establish procedures to immediately share threat information to strengthen the collective defense of Department of Defense and civilian networks. E. Striking from subsection 3C, I.A., the word novel. F. Striking subsection 4B, advise. G. Striking subsections 4D, E, E. H. Striking section 5 and redesignating sections 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 as sections 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, respectively. And I. Striking from subsection 8C the phrase, in the areas of intrusion detection, use of hardware roots of trust for secure booting, and development and deployment of security patches. Second 2. Further amendments to Executive Order 14144. Executive Order 14144 is hereby amended by A. Striking Section 1 and inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. Section 1. Policy. Foreign nations and criminals continue to conduct cyber campaigns targeting the United States and Americans. The People's Republic of China presents the most active and persistent cyber threat to United States government, private sector, and critical infrastructure networks. But significant threats also emanate from Russia, Iran, North Korea, and others who undermine United States cybersecurity. These campaigns disrupt the delivery of critical services across the nation, cost billions of dollars, and undermine American security and privacy. More must be done to improve the nation's cybersecurity against these threats. I am ordering additional actions to improve our nation's cybersecurity, focusing on defending our digital infrastructure, securing the services and capabilities most vital to the digital domain, and building our capability to address key threats. B. Striking subsection 2C and inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. C. Relevant executive departments and agencies shall take the following actions. I. By August 1, 2025, the Secretary of Commerce, acting through the Director of NIST, shall establish a consortium with industry at the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence to develop guidance, informed by the consortium as appropriate, that demonstrates the implementation of secure software development, security, and operations practices based on NIST Special Publication 800-218, Secure Software Development Framework, SSDF. C. By September 2, 2025, the Secretary of Commerce, acting through the Director of NIST, shall update NIST Special Publication 800-53, Security and Privacy Controls for Information Systems and Organizations, to provide guidance on how to securely and reliably deploy patches and updates. C. By December 1, 2025, the Secretary of Commerce, acting through the Director of NIST, in consultation with the heads of such agencies as the Director of NIST deems appropriate, shall develop and publish a preliminary update to the SSDF. This preliminary update shall include practices, procedures, controls, and implementation examples regarding the secure and reliable development and delivery of software, as well as the security of the software itself. Within 120 days of publishing the preliminary update, the Secretary of Commerce, acting through the Director of NIST, shall publish a final version of the updated SSDF. C. Striking from subsection 4B, the phrase, the security of Internet traffic depends on data being correctly routed and delivered to the intended recipient network. Routing information originated and propagated across the Internet, utilizing the Border Gateway Protocol, BGP, is vulnerable to attack and misconfiguration. And inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. Relevant agencies shall take the following actions. D. Striking subsection 4EF, and inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. F. A quantum computer of sufficient size and sophistication, also known as a cryptanalytically relevant quantum computer, CRQC, will be capable of breaking much of the public key cryptography used on digital systems across the United States and around the world. National Security Memorandum, 10 of May 4, 2022, promoting United States leadership in quantum computing while mitigating risks to vulnerable cryptographic systems, directed the federal government to prepare for a transition to cryptographic algorithms that would not be vulnerable to a CRQC. By December 1st, 2025, the Secretary of Homeland Security, acting through the Director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, and in consultation with the Director of the National Security Agency, shall release and thereafter regularly update a list of product categories in which products that support post-quantum cryptography, PQC, are widely available. 2. By December 1st, 2025, to prepare for transition to PQC, the Director of the National Security Agency with respect to National Security Systems, NSS, and the Director of OMB with respect to non-NSS shall each issue requirements for agencies to support, as soon as practicable, but not later than January 2, 2030, Transport Layer Security Protocol version 1.3 or a successor version. Striking former Section 6, newly designated Section 5, and inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. Secumer 5. Promoting security with and in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, AI, has the potential to transform cyber defense by rapidly identifying vulnerabilities, increasing the scale of threat detection techniques, and automating cyber defense. By November 1, 2025, the Secretary of Commerce, acting through the Director of NIST, the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Homeland Security, acting through the Undersecretary for Science and Technology, and the Director of the National Science Foundation, shall ensure that existing data sets for cyber defense research have been made accessible to the broader academic research community, either securely or publicly, to the maximum extent feasible, in consideration of business confidentiality and national security. By November 1, 2025, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence, in coordination with appropriate officials within the Executive Office of the President, to include officials within the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the Office of the National Cyber Director, and the Director of OMB, shall incorporate management of AI software vulnerabilities and compromise. Seize into their respective agencies existing processes and interagency coordination mechanisms for vulnerability management, including through incident tracking, response, and reporting, and by sharing indicators of compromise for AI systems. Striking Section 7 and inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. Section 7. Aligning policy to practice. Agencies' policies must align investments and priorities to improve network visibility and security controls to reduce cyber risks. In consultation with the National Cyber Director, agencies shall take the following actions. Within 3 years of the date of this order, the Director of OMB shall issue guidance, including any necessary revision to OMB Circular A-130 to address critical risks and adapt modern practices and architectures across federal information systems and networks. Within 1 year of the date of this order, the Secretary of Commerce, acting through the Director of NIST, the Secretary of Homeland Security, acting through the Director of CISA, and the Director of OMB shall establish a pilot program of a rules-as-code approach for machine-readable versions of policy and guidance that OMB, NIST, and CISA publish and manage regarding cybersecurity. Within 1 year of the date of this order, agency members of the FAR Council shall, as appropriate and consistent with applicable law, jointly take steps to amend the FAR to adopt requirements for agencies to, by January 4, 2027, require vendors to the Federal Government of Consumer Internet of Things products, as defined by 47 CFR 8.2003b, to carry United States Cyber Trust Mark labeling for those products. And striking subsection 8A, and inserting, in lieu thereof, the following. Except as specifically provided for in subsection 4F of this order, sections 1 through 7 of this order shall not apply to federal information systems that are NSS or are otherwise identified by the Department of Defense or the intelligence community as debilitating impact systems. D. The cost for publication of this order shall be borne by the Department of Homeland Security. The White House, June 6, 2025. Filed 6-10-25, 11:15 a.m. FR Document 2025, 10804. Summary. This executive order updates federal cybersecurity policies to enhance secure software development practices, especially NIST guidance, prepare federal networks for post-quantum cryptography, expand AI use in cyber defense, cuts some previous mandates and sections from EO 144, January 2025, to streamline implementation, clarifies that cyber sanctions apply only to foreign persons, not domestic entities. Pros 1. Stronger cybersecurity posture focuses on post-quantum cryptography readiness, which is critical. Quantum computers could one day break existing encryption. Accelerates guidance for secure software development. Updates NIST's Secure Software Development Framework and SP 853. Encourages a machine-readable, rules-as-code approach for federal cybersecurity policy. Makes compliance clearer and less error-prone. 2. Clarity in scope. The amendments explicitly state that cyber sanctions target foreign actors only, reducing legal uncertainty for U.S.-based companies and citizens. 3. AI integration requires agencies to share AI datasets for cyber defense research, develop methods to track and respond to AI-specific vulnerabilities, incorporate AI into threat detection and incident response. 4. Supply chain and consumer protections. Launches a Cyber Trust Mark labeling program for IoT products to reduce consumer risk from insecure devices. 5. Flexibility removes or consolidates earlier provisions that may have been duplicative or impractical. Cons 1. Partial rollback of earlier provisions. Strikes several sections of EO 14144, which critics could see as weakening ambitions for large-scale cyber modernization, e.g., removal of some intrusion detection requirements. Eliminates detailed references to BGP security, routing security, a critical vulnerability area. 2. Implementation burden. New timelines and guidance updates by NIST and DHS require substantial agency resources. Smaller vendors working with the federal government may struggle to meet new IoT labeling requirements. 3. Quantum transition. Uncertainty. While post-quantum cryptography planning is mandated, some experts think timelines, 2030, could be too slow if quantum breakthroughs accelerate. 4. Privacy and AI risks. Expanding AI datasets and sharing threat indicators could create new privacy and civil liberties issues if not carefully controlled. How it affects U.S. citizens, domestic and abroad. Domestic. If you use federal or critical infrastructure services, better security standards could protect personal data from ransomware and foreign cyber attacks, reduce identity theft risk, IoT cyber trust. Mark labeling could help consumers make safer purchasing decisions. Federal contractors and developers will face stricter software security expectations. Abroad. U.S. citizens working abroad in sensitive sectors, e.g., contractors, NGOs, may see tighter controls on how their software and devices must be secured. More coordination with U.S. agencies on cyber threats from Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. How it affects military service members. Defense systems. Integration of AI into DoD cyber defense tools may enhance protection of military networks. Post-quantum cryptography ensures military communications and classified systems remain secure over the long term. Training and compliance. Military IT units will need to adopt new cryptographic standards and vulnerability management processes. Supply chain. Military procurement of IoT and software must align with the new labeling and secure development rules. Bottom line, Executive Order 14306 is a significant cybersecurity update aiming to future-proof government networks against quantum threats. Clarify enforcement scope. Foreign cyber actors. Encourage the use of AI and secure software practices. It also trims down or reorganizes some earlier measures, which some will welcome as streamlining, and others will criticize as retreating from more aggressive goals. Let's take a look at the news to understand what is currently happening in the cybersecurity space. Potential risks, if implementers lack integrity. 1. Weak enforcement of sanctions. The EO narrows sanctions to foreign persons, making it easier for dishonest actors to misrepresent ownership structures, hide behind shell companies, evade accountability for significant malicious cyber activity. If agencies don't rigorously verify foreign control, bad actors could slip through. 2. Superficial compliance with security standards. Agencies and contractors could claim they've adopted the secure software development framework, prepared for post-quantum cryptography, labeled IoT devices. In reality, they might cut corners, creating a false sense of security. Example: a contractor self-certifies compliance but leaves known vulnerabilities unpatched. 3. AI misuse or manipulation. The EO promotes expanding AI datasets and tools for cyber defense. Dishonest insiders could introduce backdoors or biased data, use AI monitoring powers for unauthorized surveillance, underreport AI vulnerabilities to protect reputations. 4. Lack of transparency. The EO requires new public guidance and reports, e.g. from NIST, DHS, OMB. If these processes are opaque or manipulated, stakeholders, citizens, watchdogs, researchers will struggle to verify compliance. Oversight bodies, Congress, inspectors general, could be misled. 5. Procurement and labeling fraud. The cyber trust mark for IoT devices relies on manufacturers and resellers being truthful about security. Dishonest vendors might apply labels without meeting standards, provide counterfeit compliance documentation. Practical insight: what this means for you if the implementing entities are not honest. The intent of the EO, stronger cybersecurity, would be hollow. You could see ongoing or increased breaches of sensitive government data, more widespread consumer harms, insecure devices in homes and businesses, wasted taxpayer money on sham compliance. What should be done to mitigate this? Independent audits of agencies and contractors, clear public disclosure requirements for compliance milestones, strong whistleblower protections, randomized third-party validation of IoT labeling and software security claims. Bottom line, even the best-written executive order relies on the honesty and rigor of those executing it. If that's lacking, cybersecurity improvements will remain largely on paper, and real-world risks will persist or grow. For democracy. I live for, and democracy I will die for. Appreciate you for visiting. Make it a point to like, comment, sub, and share. This Friday, July 4th, 2025, we'll be taking a closer look at the executive orders issued by the 11th through the 15th Presidents of the United States. That means we'll be exploring the actions of James K. Polk, Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan. Together, we'll examine the key directives they signed, how those orders shaped the nation during a time of rapid growth and rising tensions, and what lasting impacts they left behind. Let's dive in and uncover the history behind their executive decisions. A word from Brother Malcolm X before we leave. Calm X.
Without education, you are not going anywhere in this world. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. I have often reflected upon the new vistas that reading has opened to me. I knew right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long dormant craving to be mentally alive. And just because you have colleges and universities doesn't mean you have education.
For Democracy, please like, comment, and sub. We look forward to seeing you July 4, 2025, where we go over the 11th to 15 presidents. Here at For Democracy, we will be reading Malcolm X autobiography written by Alex Haley. Until next time, For Democracy.